At 1:19 a.m. local time on March 8, 2014, the cockpit of a Boeing 777 is an ocean of calm. The plane, call sign Malaysian 370, is cruising at 35,000 feet over the dark waters of the South China Sea. It's at the very edge of Malaysian-controlled airspace, a critical transfer point where it is about to be handed over to air traffic control in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. On the ground in Kuala Lumpur, a controller gives a routine instruction. Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. The pause. Then, a voice from the cockpit, clear and untroubled. Good night, Malaysian 370. These are the last calm and chillingly normal words ever heard from the flight. 2 minutes later, at the precise moment the plane should have been appearing on Vietnamese radar, its icon, the small, blinking dot representing 239 human lives, simply vanishes. At Ho Chi Minh Control, there is nothing. The controllers in Vietnam see only an empty space where an airliner should be. At Kuala Lumpur Control, the icon for MH370 has disappeared. They call again and again. There is only static. There was no distress call, no mayday, no report of bad weather or sudden mechanical failure. It didn't just crash. It evaporated. In the 21st century, a world saturated with connection, GPS, and constant satellite tracking, a 200-ton aircraft, one of the most reliable ever built, simply disappeared from the face of the Earth. This is not just the story of a missing plane. It is the story of a puzzle that has defied investigators, scientists, and grieving families for over a decade. It is the story of the flight that vanished. It all began with complete, almost mundane normality. At Kuala Lumpur International Airport, just after midnight, flight MH370 was a red-eye, a routine 7-hour flight from Malaysia's capital to Beijing, China. For the passengers boarding, it was just travel. Some were eager to get home, others were heading to a new destination. The aircraft itself was a giant of the skies, the Boeing 777-200ER. This specific plane, registration 9MMRO, was 12 years old and had a solid, unblemished service record. The 777 is, to this day, one of the safest aircraft ever built, a machine of incredible technological redundancy and reliability. The weather was perfect. A clear, calm night for flying. On board were 227 passengers. They were a snapshot of our connected world. A large contingent of Chinese nationals, including a group of celebrated artists returning from an exhibition, engineers, businessmen, a group of Buddhist pilgrims on their way home, families with young children. 2 men, it would later be discovered, were traveling on stolen passports. In the cockpit were 2 men. The captain, 53-year-old Zahari Ahmad Shah, was a man described by his peers as a pilot's pilot. He was a senior captain and instructor with over 18,000 hours of flight time. His first officer, Farik Hamid, was 27 years old. He was a young pilot on the cusp of a major career milestone. This flight was his final training check to be fully certified on the 777. At 12:42 a.m., the flight was cleared for takeoff. The massive Rolls-Royce engine spooled up, and MH370 lifted gracefully into the warm, clear Malaysian night. The first 40 minutes of the flight were, in a word, perfect. The plane climbed to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The seatbelt sign would have been turned off. In the cabin, passengers would be settling in, watching movies, reading, or drifting off to sleep, utterly unaware of anything being wrong. At 1:19 a.m., MH370 had reached a waypoint, a specific navigational fix in the sky named Igari. This point is crucial. It is not a physical place, but a digital line in the sky. It marks the invisible border where Malaysian air traffic control's responsibility ends and Vietnamese control begins. It was at this moment that Kuala Lumpur's controller radioed the flight with that final, routine instruction, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh. And the pilot replied with, "Good night, Malaysian 370. The pilots were acknowledging the handoff. Their very next action should have been to switch their radio frequency and check in with Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh, This is Malaysian 370, level 350. It's a call that happens hundreds of times a night. But they never did. The plane and its crew never checked in with Vietnam. And in that same moment, something else happened. Something that transforms this from a potential accident into a profound and deliberate mystery. The plane's transponder, the device that broadcasts its identity, altitude, and speed to civilian radar, was switched off. This is not something that happens by accident. It's not a button you bump. Investigators would later determine it was turned off manually, from within the cockpit, at the exact moment the plane was in an electronic no-man's land between two air traffic zones. In one instant, MH370 became a ghost. It was invisible to the civilian air traffic controllers, who were now, in the coming minutes, growing confused, then concerned, then frantic, trying to contact a flight that was no longer there. But it was not invisible to everyone. Miles away, a military radar, one that doesn't need a transponder to see, was watching. And it saw the ghost do something impossible. It saw the small, unlabeled dot make a sharp, deliberate, and controlled turn to the left. It was turning back, away from its destination, and heading out on a new, silent, and unknown course. The ghost was being flown. On civilian radar screens, there was just emptiness. Air traffic controllers in Vietnam and Malaysia were now desperately trying to raise the plane, but it was not truly invisible. Far from the commercial air routes, a very different kind of radar was watching: Malaysian military primary radar. Unlike civilian secondary radar, which relies on a cooperative transponder signal, primary radar is a blunt instrument. It sends out a powerful pulse and simply waits for what bounces back. And at 1:21 a.m., minutes after the ghosting, something did bounce back. A single, unidentified dot appeared on the military screens. A dot that was not broadcasting any identity. A dot that was not on any scheduled flight plan. This dot, which investigators would later confirm was MH370, was doing something that defied all explanation for an airliner in trouble. It wasn't tumbling. It wasn't descending. It had begun a long, smooth, deliberate turn to the southwest. This was not a turn of panic. It was a turn so precise that investigators later concluded it was likely programmed into the plane's flight management computer. It was no longer flying north to Beijing. It was flying back across the Malay Peninsula. It flew over towns, over land, a silent, 200-ton ghost. This was a plane under complete control, flown by an unknown hand on a new and secret trajectory. The military controllers on duty that night reportedly watched the unlabeled blip. They noted it was not hostile and, tragically, did not connect it to the passenger jet that had just been declared missing on the other side of the peninsula. This was a catastrophic and crucial missed opportunity. The plane, now a ghost, continued on its new path. Its silence was almost total. The transponder was off. The radio was silent. And another system, the ACARS, which automatically sends engine health reports to the airline, had also stopped working. The last ACARS report was sent at 1:07 a.m. The next was due at 1:37 a.m. That transmission never came. Sometime in that 30-minute window, someone had disabled it. First the ACARS, then the transponder. This was a systematic, sequential silencing of the plane. The military radar tracked the dot as it flew up the Malacca Strait, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. It wasn't flying randomly. It was following known aviation waypoints, VAMPI, Mecker, points in the sky used by pilots to navigate that exact route. This was not an accident. It was expert flying. At 2:22 a.m., more than an hour after its last good night, the plane was last detected by a Malaysian military radar near the island of Pulau Perak, in the middle of the strait. It was flying northwest out into the Andaman Sea. And then, it reached the absolute limit of the radar's range. The signal grew faint, and then it was gone. This time for good. As the sun began to rise thousands of miles away in Beijing, a new day was beginning. At Beijing Capital International Airport, families and friends were gathering at the arrival's gate. They held flowers and welcome signs, waiting to greet their loved ones on the 6:30 a.m. flight from Kuala Lumpur. but 6:30 came and went. The arrivals board, a giant screen of hope and plans, flipped. The status for MH370 changed to delayed. Annoyance soon gave way to confusion. At 7:24 a.m., Malaysia Airlines finally released its first public statement, admitting it had lost contact with the flight. They claimed they lost contact at 2:40 a.m. This itself was incorrect. The plane had been missing for 6 hours. Airline staff with grim faces began to gather the families, leading them away from the public arrivals hall into a cold hotel conference room. The questions started. Where is the plane? What's happening? There were no answers. Just confusion, which soon curdled into anger and raw, public grief. While the families were trapped in a room in Beijing, the world's media began to report the impossible news. And the world's navies began to search in the South China Sea, the completely wrong ocean. Days turned into a week. The initial search focused on the South China Sea, but that was a dead end. The plane wasn't there. It hadn't been there for hours. As the world's media descended into a frenzy of speculation and Malaysian officials gave confusing, contradictory reports, engineers at a British satellite company, Inmarsat, decided to check their own internal logs. And they found a digital ghost. MH370 satellite data unit, the box that connects the plane to their satellite in orbit, had not gone silent. Even after the transponder was off, even after the ACARS data system was cut, the satellite box, on its own, continued to automatically respond to hourly status checks, or pings, from the ground station. It was like a phone on silent mode, still receiving network registration pings even if no one was picking up. In fact, airline staff had tried to call the plane's cockpit twice via satellite phone. The calls were never answered, but they connected to the satellite unit. The plane was still on. These hourly, handshake pings contained no data. No GPS location, no speed, no altitude. They were just a digital whisper, it's electronic, I am still here. And they continued, one after another, for 7 more hours. This discovery was a world-changing breakthrough, and it presented a horrifying new reality. The pings proved that MH370 had continued to fly for nearly 8 hours after it vanished. But fly where? The Inmarsat engineers began an analysis that had never been attempted before. The pings had no location data, but they did have 2 crucial pieces of metadata. The first was burst timing offset, or BTO. This is, simply, the time it took for the ping to travel from the ground station, up to the satellite, down to the plane, and back again. By measuring this time down to the microsecond, engineers could calculate the plane's distance from the satellite, creating a series of giant concentric rings on the Earth's surface. But the second piece of data was the smoking gun. It was called burst frequency offset, or BFO. This is the Doppler effect, the same effect that makes an ambulance siren change pitch as it passes you. By measuring the frequency of the returning ping, engineers could tell if the plane was moving towards or away from the satellite's fixed position. And the data was unambiguous. The plane was on a steady, southern trajectory. The engineers now had 7 rings from the BTO data and a clear directional trend from the BFO data. When they combined them, a path took shape. It created 2 massive corridors of possibility that stretched for thousands of miles. The first was the Northern Corridor. This arc ran from Malaysia northwest over some of the most heavily militarized and monitored airspace in the world: Thailand, China, India, Pakistan, Central Asia. For the plane to have flown this route for 7 hours without being intercepted or even seen by any country's air defense was beyond improbable. The BFO data also did not neatly fit this path. The second was the Southern Corridor. This arc ran from Malaysia south, deep into the vast, empty, desolate expanse of the southern Indian Ocean. A place with no radar, no islands, no ships, a path of least resistance. The Doppler data, the BFO values, were a near-perfect match for this southern route. It was not a process of elimination. It was positive data pointing in one horrifying direction. On March 15th, 7 days after the plane vanished, the Malaysian Prime Minister stood before the world and announced that the search in the South China Sea was over. The new search area was the southern Indian Ocean. There was one final piece of data. At 8:11 a.m., the plane sent its seventh and last scheduled hourly handshake. This seventh arc became the primary line of interest, but it was not the final signal. At 8:19 a.m., 8 minutes after that last ping, the satellite received one final, unscheduled burst of data. It was a logon request. To the engineers, this signal told a chilling and definitive story. It was the sound of a system rebooting. The only logical explanation is that this was the moment the plane ran out of fuel. First the right engine, then the left would have flamed out. As the plane lost main electrical power, its ram air turbine, a small emergency propeller, would have automatically deployed to provide essential power. This power fluctuation caused the satellite data unit to shut down and try to restart. This logon request was its final, dying breath. It was the smoking gun that defined the end of the flight. The plane had flown until its tanks were dry. And this singular data point, this final electronic gasp, is what defined the entire underwater search area. A specific arc in the most remote ocean on Earth. Now they had a where. Not a specific location, but a line. The seventh arc. It was a single, massive arc stretching thousands of miles across the most hostile and uncharted ocean on the planet. The Southern Indian Ocean. The search that was mobilized was the largest and most expensive in aviation history. Dozens of countries, ships, planes, and satellites all converged on this remote patch of water, 2,500 kilometers southwest of Australia. It was a search for a needle in a stack of needles. The ocean here is not a flat surface. It is a brutal, alien landscape. The roaring 40s winds create waves the size of 6-story buildings. And beneath the waves, it is even worse. The seafloor is a landscape of deep, lightless canyons, underwater volcanoes, and ridges sharper than mountains. This is not an ocean, it is an abyss. For months, aircraft scanned the surface looking for a sign, a piece of debris, an oil slick, anything. They chased false leads, shipping containers, seaweed, nothing. The search was then forced to go underwater. A fleet of advanced submersibles and sonar-equipped vessels began the slow, agonizing process of mowing the lawn, pinging the ocean floor in a search box the size of Scotland. For 3 years, they searched. 120,000 square kilometers were mapped. They found shipwrecks from the 19th century. They found underwater mountains no human knew existed. But of MH370, they found absolutely nothing. The entire 3-year underwater search was based on one crucial assumption: that the plane flew on autopilot in a straight line after its final turn until it ran out of fuel. The ghost flight scenario. But as the search area came up empty, that assumption began to crack. And the most prominent and disturbing theory gained new and terrifying weight: deliberate pilot action. This theory suggests that Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah used his expert knowledge to execute a monstrous plan. This theory alleges that he depressurized the plane, bleeding the oxygen from the cabin and incapacitating the passengers and crew with hypoxia within minutes. They would have drifted into unconsciousness, never knowing what was happening. The pilot, meanwhile, would have been safe using the cockpit's independent oxygen supply. The evidence for this is chilling. The turnback was manually flown. The transponder was manually turned off. The communication systems were manually and sequentially silenced. This was an act of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone trying to make a 777 disappear. But the evidence against is just as powerful. Captain Zahari had no known motive. He had no history of mental instability, no known financial problems, no radical beliefs. His family and his colleagues describe him as a kind, gentle, and professional man, a loving father who was building a flight simulator in his own home out of pure passion for aviation. This theory of a mass murder-suicide paints a picture of a monster that no one who knew the man can recognize. If it wasn't deliberate, what else could it be? This brings us to the second major theory: a catastrophic, incapacitating failure. This theory suggests a sudden fire, perhaps in the cargo hold or in the electronics bay, filling the cockpit with toxic smoke. Or a slow, silent decompression caused by a structural failure. In this scenario, the pilots, realizing they have a critical emergency, would have followed their training. First, aviate, fly the plane. They would have immediately turned the plane and aimed for the nearest safe airport, like Palau Langkawi, which would explain the turn back. But before they could finish their turn or make a distress call, they and everyone on board were overcome by smoke or by hypoxia, a lack of oxygen that robs the brain of the ability to think before you even know you are in danger. This scenario is terrifying, and it has happened before. In 2005, Helios Flight 522 suffered a slow decompression. The pilots became incapacitated. The plane continued to fly on autopilot, a ghost flight, 4 hours, until it ran out of fuel and crashed into a hillside in Greece. But for MH370, this theory has a huge problem. A fire or a decompression does not explain why the transponder and the ACARS system were turned off. One, perhaps. But both, systematically? The accidental theory cannot easily explain the deliberate and total silence. For 508 days, the plane was a ghost. A collection of data points and theories. There was zero physical proof that MH370 was even in the Indian Ocean at all. Maybe the pings were wrong. Maybe it was in Central Asia. Then, on July 29, 2015, 16 months after the disappearance, something washed ashore. Not in the search area, but on the other side of the ocean. On Réunion Island, a tiny speck of land near Africa, thousands and thousands of miles away. A local man cleaning the beach found a large, barnacle-encrusted piece of metal. It was unmistakably part of an aircraft wing. A flaperon, the moving part that controls the plane's roll and lift. Investigators flew in from around the world. They checked the serial numbers, the maintenance records, the paint. The conclusion was definitive. It was from a Boeing 777, and it was from Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. It was the first, and to this day, the only piece of the plane to be absolutely and positively identified. The ghost had finally given up a piece of itself. The ocean had delivered a message. The discovery of the flaperon was a heartbreaking confirmation. The plane was not in Central Asia. It had come down in the southern Indian Ocean. The pings were right. It also proved that the plane had disintegrated on impact. The damage was violent. It had not landed gently on the water. It had shattered. And once the world knew what to look for, more pieces began to appear. Following the flaperon, a steady, scattered trail of debris began washing up on the coastlines of the western Indian Ocean. A piece of an engine cowling in South Africa. An interior cabin panel in Madagascar. A small, triangular fragment in Mozambique, with the words, "No step," stenciled on it. A seat cushion. A piece of the cabin floor. Oceanographers and drift model experts got to work. They analyzed the ocean currents, the wind, the barnacles, to try and trace these pieces backwards through time to where they must have started their journey. The models all confirmed the general search area, but they also suggested that the crash site might be just north of the original search zone. A tantalizing and devastating hint that the searchers had just missed it. All the theories, the science, the oceanography often obscure the central, inescapable truth. This is not a puzzle. It is a human tragedy. It is a grave for 239 people. And for their families, their parents, their children, their spouses, the last decade has been a unique and cruel kind of purgatory. They are the victims of ambiguous loss. A loss that has no finality. How can you grieve for someone when there is no body, no crash site, no explanation, and no goodbye? How do you declare a loved one dead when the slightest possibility exists that they are not? Groups like Voice 370, formed by the next of kin, have had to become investigators and political advocates. They have had to fight for every piece of information. They have battled against official secrecy, competing theories, and the world's fading attention. They are the ones who have kept the pressure on. They are the ones who have demanded that the search must continue. Because for them, this mystery is not an abstract aviation puzzle. It is a missing piece of their own soul. And it is still missing. In January 2017, after 3 years and scanning 120,000 square kilometers, the official, government-led search was suspended. They called it indefinitely. The most expensive search in history, costing over $150 million, had failed. It seemed that the world was giving up. The trail was going cold. But then, an unlikely new player emerged. A private American robotics company named Ocean Infinity. They came to the Malaysian government and to the families with a radical proposal. A proposal that was almost too good to be true. They would continue the search, and they would do it for free. It was called No Find, No Fee. Ocean Infinity would bear the entire cost of the mission, tens of millions of dollars, using their own state-of-the-art search vessel, the Seabed Constructor. And they would only accept payment if they found the wreckage. It was a high-tech, high-stakes gamble for the truth. Ocean Infinity's first search in 2018 was a heroic failure. Using not one, but a fleet of advanced autonomous underwater vehicles, they scanned a vast new area based on the new drift analysis. But they too found nothing. But science did not stop. In the years since, new analysis of the Inmarsat data, new studies on the Flappern's drift, and even new acoustic technology that may have detected the underwater sound of the crash, have refined the search area. The where is getting smaller and more defined. The haystack is shrinking. And this has led to a new surge of optimism. In 2024, more than 10 years after the disappearance, Ocean Infinity has once again stepped forward. They have a new, more advanced fleet of robots. They have a new, refined search area. And the Malaysian government has, for the first time, publicly committed to restarting the search. The ships are being prepared. The new No Find, No Fee mission is on the table. There is a real, tangible belief that this time, with new technology and new data, they will finally find it. 10 years. More than a decade since the last good night. Why does this mystery still hold us so tightly? It's because it is a fundamental violation of our modern world. In an age where we are all tracked and traced and connected, where our phones report our location every second, the disappearance of MH370 feels impossible. It feels like a tear in the fabric of reality. It is a reminder that despite all our technology, the world is still vast and unknown, and that the ocean is a keeper of secrets, a deep, dark place that does not give up its dead easily. We as a species need to find patterns. We need answers. We cannot accept the void. The answer is down there. In the cold, lightless deep, inside a small, damaged black box, is the truth. The why and the how are waiting to be found. Until that black box is recovered, until the final moments of the flight are known, the 239 souls on board and the families they left behind will not have their final answer. The search for the flight that vanished continues. In an age of constant surveillance, do you believe the truth of MH370 lies in a catastrophic technical failure, or something more human and perhaps more sinister? Share your perspective in the comments below. We value your insight. If you appreciate this kind of in-depth analysis and want to support independent documentary storytelling, please like this video. To join our community of curious minds and uncover the layers beneath the surface, subscribe to Stratum Logic. Click the video on your screen now to continue the journey. Thank you for deep thinking with us.